Welcome back. As you know, I am Eli, the computer guy, here for the Daily Blob, where I shake my brain nipples darn near every day so I can get some of that dirty YouTube money and be able to afford to provide a free, in-person, hands-on technology education that empowers you to do whatever the hell it is you want to do in Durham, North Carolina. So if you're interested, it's called Silicon Dojo, silicondojo.com. That's right, my friends. I shake my brain nipples here so that I can dance when I really want to dance. I'm really a techno ballerina. You just are too focused on my brain nips. Anyways, it's getting dramatic in the tech world. That's right, ARM has come in and they are just bitch smacking the other AI companies, and they're like, oh, looks like somebody's not gonna be very efficient. Now, are you? Doesn't look like your architecture scheme is gonna be sustainable. And I think this is an interesting argument coming from ARM, and the whole question that I always bring up is the whole idea of architectures, right? Don't tell a node developer, but their code actually does in fact run on hardware. It's always weird, right? Many years ago, one of these blowhards came out. Basically said the world is built with code. And it's like, yeah, my roof isn't. My sewer system isn't. Yeah, funnily enough, no. The only reason you would think the world was made with code is if you were firmly planted your head up your own ass. But anyways, architecture is important. That's why I keep talking about architecture. How do you design the overall systems appropriately in order to solve your particular problems? Again, in this world of AI, where everybody's worried, AI is going to take tech jobs. No, AI is simply going to flush out employees that were probably worthless to begin with. Remember, in the technology world, we don't really get paid to code. We don't really get paid to rack servers. We don't really get paid to create firewall rules. We get paid to sit in front of whiteboards with cups of coffee or beer or your intoxication of choice and have really long-winded esoteric arguments about the latency of systems, right? How should this be built out for our particular situation, right? Facebook is going to build an architecture that looks fundamentally different than the architecture that would be built for a local company, that type of thing. And so it's very important to think about. So it's interesting with ARM coming out, because one of the things that we've heard with all of these AI deployments are, all of these multi-gigawatt data centers, right? Sam Altman comes out, Zuckerberg comes out, and they're building these data centers that, are the size of Manhattan. Like one data center Meta is building, I think it's in Illinois, is apparently the size of Manhattan, right? And there's this idea, this is how AI has to be done. But what I want you to understand, what I want you to fundamentally understand, even if you disagree with everything that I say, the important thing to understand right now is that this iteration of artificial intelligence, again, to be clear, this iteration of it, basically this LLM generative model, basically, this is a technology rather in its infancy. Maybe not in its infancy, definitely in its terrible twos, though. It has figured out how to walk. It's not really sure where the hell it should go. And it really has a tendency of banging itself into the coffee tables and trying to kill itself, right? But that's the thing, right? There's this weird idea that this iteration of technology is somehow a mature technology. Obviously, Eli, this is how you build out the infrastructure, because we know, right? But the important thing to understand, this isn't a website infrastructure. Again, website infrastructure, Nginx or Apache or God help you, IIS or whatever else, that is a mature technology, right? You build the websites, you deploy the websites, you got PHP or whatever else, that is mature. VPS, virtual private servers, a lot of the virtualization that goes on right now, that is a mature technology. At this point, there are very few surprises. It may be expensive, but it's rather trivial, right? You know what to do. There is a playbook out there. You get enough money, you get enough resources, you get people that know how to deploy it, and as long as you can write the check, you can deploy it relatively easily. Everybody knows what's going on, right? You are not going to fundamentally compete with DigitalOcean by coming up with some new fucking VPS game. Like we realized if we actually ran VPSs on Idaho potatoes instead of those dirty, nasty Venezuelan potatoes, then we could scale. So that's not going to happen, right? If you're going to compete with DigitalOcean, you're going to compete. God knows you're gonna build your server near low-cost electricity. Hey, we can buy our electricity for a lower cost than DigitalOcean can. Ergo, we're winning. Again, great. That's fine. That's fine from a business standpoint, but it's not exactly fucking revolutionary. Oh my God, you mean you can outcompete DigitalOcean because your electricity costs 50% less? Never would have thought about that, right? But the important thing to understand, again, with this AI, not AI, this whole generative artificial intelligence thing, we don't really know what the architecture should look like. At the end of the day, right? Five years from now, we don't really fundamentally know what that's going to look like. And this is really an important thing to be thinking about, again, with investments and everything else, is one of my frustrations with all of this, is simply there's this idea that we know when we fundamentally don't. And so the curious thing here, this is coming from CNBC, ARM CEO says moving some AI workloads from the cloud will make it more sustainable. Holy crap. Holy crap. They should give that guy a 6th grade diploma. If he can say, hey, maybe we should move some stuff off the cloud onto the local device, wow. Well, I bet he should be able to graduate into junior high school. I'll bet he'll be very good there. But it is, right? It's an infantile, sophomoric, horse crap thing to say. But, you know, when you're in the world of 3rd graders, sophomoric crap to say can seem fucking brilliant. But I think this is going to be an interesting thing, again, with the whole idea of where should quote-unquote AI processes occur. One of the things we talk about with artificial intelligence, there's 2 major processes, right? There's the training of the models. That takes a lot of energy and resources and GPU capabilities. But then there's what's called inference, using the model itself in order to get an output. And one of the things we talk about is inference resource consumption is just massively less than training resource consumption. The other interesting thing to be thinking about too with a lot of these models is what we're figuring out. Again, IBM, for whatever reason, IBM is like really heavy into this concept. IBM has this whole idea of the LLM stack. Now simply, they use one LLM, you ask it a question, maybe you give it RAG or something else and get an output. But the idea is that your query will actually go through multiple LLMs. A really cool LLM I've got to start playing with. I was just at the All Things Open conference. IBM has this LLM called a Docling, kind of like a duck, only with an O, D-O-C-L-I-N-G. Anyways, what that does is it knows, basically it got trained on documents. This is how... See, in the modern world, OpenAI is coming up with models that will give you erotica, and IBM is coming up with models that understand business documents. Huh, funny how that works. Anyways, this is an LLM model. All it understands is documents, and basically is able to pull out document information and dump it into JSON. Right? So basically the idea is you're like, say, I need this information for the document. It pulls out all the information in the document in JSON, and then you're able to interact with it a lot easier, right? So there's this whole idea. And then that's one of the questions too, again, with these models, right? The frontier, like the 450 billion parameter model. Man, you're not gonna run that in any machine in your house, right? It would cost a lot just to run it. $10,000 probably just for a computer, just to run that damn thing. So you're not gonna run that. But as I've talked about before, right, there's the PHI model from Microsoft. There's a lot of these smaller models. And so some smaller models, right, smaller models might actually solve your problems better than bigger models. So one of the questions there is, if you can have a number of models that can run on your computer, then could you create a system that determines whether the model needs to be run locally on your system or whether the model needs to be run up on this 450 billion parameter thing, up on some gigawatt data center or whatever, right? That's kind of like the architecture questions to be thinking about. And again, I don't hear a lot about this, which is fascinating. That's one of the big things to understand too about the whole technology world is the concept of distribution, right? How do you distribute a load in order to perform to improve performance? So you think about like this with JavaScript. So you have back-end programming languages, PHP, Python, that type of thing, and front-end programming languages normally are going to be dealing with JavaScript, at least for web app development. Back-end language, such as PHP, basically everything runs on the server itself. The server burns all the resources in order to get an output, and then that output is sent to the client. Well, one of the things you can do is with JavaScript, it's a client-side programming language. So basically, all that happens is a text file. Text is sent to the web browser. The web browser then burns its resources in order to come up with an output. So that's one of the ways you can distribute the load. So therefore, your server doesn't need to be as powerful, simply based off of how how you design the software. I had a buddy of mine who had a startup company. Literally, initially for their MVP, prototype, all that kind of stuff. They designed everything using PHP. So at the time, it was easier. Design everything with PHP, sends all the responses to the client. What they realized is at scale, under load, like the server who basically crashed to a halt. So he literally rewrote his entire stack to push everything with JavaScript, right? That's kind of one of those architecture things to be considered, right? So ARM is coming out, smacking down. He suggested that over time, a large number of multi-gigawatt data centers won't be sustainable. Boom! Take that, Mark Zuckerberg. Boom. You won't be sustainable. That is some bitch talk in the tech world. Let me tell you, that is white boy. That is white boy putting his fist up and saying, "Yeah, Mark Zuckerberg, you don't know how architecture works." Anyways, ARM Holding CEO Rene Haas told CNBC's Jim Cramer on Wednesday that moving some AI functions away from the cloud could help reduce energy usage. Yes. Over time, he suggested a large number of multi-gigawatt data centers won't be sustainable. And that's going to be an interesting question. Again, when you think about just the massive amount of electricity and resources these AI data centers need, I think the whole this may be one of the few times in the tech world where sustainability actually matters. Like a lot of times people complain about sustainability, they're like, e-waste. And then they go about their day. This may be one of the only times, this whole AI revolution, the only times that sustainability actually keeps people's attention. Quote, if you look to yourself, well, there are the kind of things that you need to happen. I think there's two vectors, Haas said. One is low power, the lowest power solution you can get in the cloud. ARM really contributes there. But I think even more specifically is moving those AI workloads away from the cloud to the local applications. While he said AI training will likely always happen in the cloud, running AI called inference can happen locally. History has shown, quote, we always go to hybrid models around computing, according to Haas. He suggests the hybrid dynamic will play out when it comes to AI, which will help alleviate huge power investments. ARM and Meta on Wednesday said they would expand their partnership to, quote, scale AI efficiency across every layer of compute, spanning AI software and data center infrastructure. Haas told Cramer that the partnership with Meta, quote, is largely around data centers, but more broadly around software and the software stacks associated with it. He also discussed ARM's involvement in Meta's new Ray-Ban Wayfarer glasses, also saying the AI for the technology is running both in the cloud and locally. Quote, for example, when you say, hey, Meta, into those glasses, that's not happening on the cloud, that's actually happening in your glasses, and that's running on ARM. And so this, I think, is going to be an interesting thing to be considering too, with this whole idea of the AI arms race. Remember, at the end of the day, you don't buy technology. You don't buy technology. You do not deploy technology. You buy products. You deploy products. So right now, when we look at the AI arms race, we think we know who the winners will be. Right? We think it's NVIDIA, OpenAI, that type of deal. One of the important things to understand, though, is a lot of these technologies, right, basically are going to have to be packaged up into products that customers will actually use. And the weird thing at the end of the day is the products that the customers actually go for are not necessarily the products, you think they're going to go for, right? VHS over Betamax, Blu-ray over HD DVD, and then streaming, really, at the end of the day. That killed Blu-ray and the whole nine yards. And so one of the interesting things to be thinking about here is what are going to be the standards and what are going to be the stack for a distributed AI architecture, right? As I talked about before with web architecture, you have the web server. The web server sends a text file to your web browser, and then JavaScript, right? Everybody uses JavaScript. When I talk about a front-end language for web app development, it is always going to be JavaScript, because in 2025, everything standardized onto JavaScript, right? And that's how it's going to go. The curious thing to be thinking about right now, again, we talk about all these models. If you go to Olama, there's like 1,000 different models out there. There's like a lot of different ways of trying to do this AI thing. So one of the questions is going to be, is what are people going to standardize on? Like I think about this doing web videos, right? You're watching this web video, right? When I started doing tech education back in 2009, right, I actually built my own infrastructure. I had servers and a co-location facility, the whole 9 yards. I actually had the H.264 codec printed out, and it was in my legal document files, so I knew what the license was for H.264, because at that time there were many what are called codecs, many codecs that were available for being able to stream video. Again, some web browsers supported some codecs, others supported other codecs. There's this whole, and again, there was a licensing scheme. There was a licensing scheme for H.264, and when I started using H.264, it was under like this permissive licensing scheme, but it was for like 5 years. It was for 5 years, and then that was supposed to get away, and then it was supposed to be for a fee. And there's this whole question: who pays for the license? Does the client pay for the license? Does the server pay for the license? A whole bunch of stuff. Right now it's 2025. You don't give a shit. You just come to YouTube and you watch a video. You have no idea. Is it OGG? Is it 364? Is it MPEG? Whatever. It's 365 now or 265 now. Anyways, right, you just come and you use it. The important thing to be considering right now is as you're building out your web AI infrastructure, thinking about the question of whose technologies will win at the end of the day. Who will be the JavaScript of the AI world? Who will become the H.264 of the AI world? And are you building your systems in that particular direction? And it'll be curious to see where all this goes. Again, you want to see something funny, listen to the guy who created JavaScript talk about why JavaScript should be dead. He's like, I have no idea why this shit still exists. JavaScript should have died like 10 years ago. But it's still here. No developers are still real. They're still real. It's all his fault. Anyways, so I think this is going to be like one of those things. Again, and that's what that whole question is for when you're going to be building out your systems and planning on that multi-year plan, right? And it's all a bet. Remember, all this shit is a bet. It is all a bet, right? And so when you're thinking about that multi-year plan, you're thinking about designing your architecture based off that multi-year plan. Where do you think all of this is going? Do you really think it makes sense, right? Let's say you want to build your AI infrastructure, right? So millions of dollars. You're not OpenAI. You're only in the millions of dollars world. So let's say right now you could get $2 million from your company to deploy AI infrastructure. But AI infrastructure is still basically a new technology. It's not mature, the whole 9 yards. When you're putting that money down, do you really want to buy 10 $200,000 NVIDIA servers? Right, because the NVIDIA GPUs, the H100s or whatever, they're about $40,000 a piece. Apparently the servers from NVIDIA cost about $200,000 a piece. So, again, when you're thinking about this, when you're betting for the future, do you think investing all of that money into NVIDIA really is the way to go? Or is it to start thinking about, but that's how we would deploy AI technology in 2025. But we know, right, in your environment, that we're not really going to have full AI buy-in, if it does get bought into. We're not going to have full buy-in until 2027, 2028. What should architecture look like in 2028? And that's where you go, and that's where you see what Apple is doing. What models and things is Apple building into their devices? What models and things is Android building in, Google building into their devices? And thinking about how you can leverage where we're going so that you can be there when you're actually fully deployed, right? When you're shooting at a moving object, you don't shoot at the moving object, you shoot slightly in front of the moving object. So one of the things to think about as you're deploying your technology is shooting slightly in front of where you think, maybe, who the hell knows, all of this stuff is going. So anyways, what do you think about that? What do you think about ARM coming out and saying multi-gigawatt data centers is not sustainable? What do you think about distributed AI architecture? Where do you think? Where do you think all of this mess is gonna go? I don't know. Put your thoughts. Put your thoughts down below. If you like these videos, give us a thumbs up. If you hate these videos, give us a thumbs down. Call me amazing. Call me a moron. Just be a real Lutnick and say it down there in the comment section. Do remember SiliconDojo.com is my pride and joy. In another week, we're going to be having a class on OpenAI's API, actually. We just had a class last week using Olama. We're going to be having more and more classes in Durham, North Carolina. In-person classes coming up. So if you're interested, go to SiliconDojo.com, become a member, RSVP, do all that kind of stuff. And with that, see y'all later.